Welcome again, everybody, to the Dome Experience here in the football complex. Along with Dino Babers, I'm Matt Park. This is the Perry's Inside Scoop. Heading into the Western Michigan game, Game 4 of the season. The Orange 1-2, and the Broncos come in 2-1. And Coach, you've had a gauntlet here to start. We talked about 2 games on the road, and just the uniqueness of arguably the biggest game of the year, sellout first in 20 years, homecoming, et cetera. All those things we addressed on last week's Inside Scoop, they're now behind you. And how do you move on from taking on number 1?
Well, I'll tell you what, we need to continue to get better. They were a fantastic football team with some amazing athletes. I still feel like we had some opportunities in the game. You have to play a perfect game to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And obviously we didn't do that, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I felt like defensively we could have played even better, but they definitely gave us an opportunity to win, and I thought our special teams was solid, but they didn't give us advantage in the kicking game. That football team's a good football team. I'd be very surprised if they're going to lose a game. Sure,
they don't play a ranked team the rest of the way. So that's enough for Clemson. But the idea is really both Clemson and Maryland, there were opportunities, if not to win the games, but certainly to make it look a lot better than it did. Just quickly off the top of the head in Clemson, you had basically a shot play early. It works, it's dropped. You have the ball at the +9, don't score. At the +3, don't score. The fact of the matter is that those opportunities were created. Are you happy with what you're doing to put the team in position to succeed?
There's no doubt. I mean, anytime you get turnovers and you're winning the turnover battle, you're giving yourself an opportunity. The extra possessions, you're giving yourselves an opportunity. We just got to move the ball more. We got to be more consistent and then not occasional. The biggest thing on offense is everybody working together as a cohesive unit. When you're on the defensive side of the ball, 1 or 2 guys can make a mistake and you can correct it with fantastic effort, a turnover, or mentally just the physicality of that part of this, that side of the ball, of knocking the ball out in a bad situation. On offense, all 11 guys have to click as one. And when they do, it's a thing of beauty, and you have offense weekly.
Sure.
And that's what we're working to. We don't want to be occasional with it. We don't want it to come and go. We want it to stay with us.
So there was an interception. You had the ball in the Clemson 9, interception on the first play, and you could feel the life go out of the building, and it had to impact the team as well. How do you transition to the flip side of that when you have a situation like that, it's the other team that should be worried and should panic and should rush, not your team?
Well, absolutely. But I think the big thing about it is that was a happening. Okay, obviously that young man fell down. We were going to throw the ball for a touchdown. All of a sudden he stands up from nowhere, and it's like right when you're letting the ball go, you're like, where'd that guy come from? Almost a Twilight Zone type deal. But we consider that a happening, and if he'd have stayed down, we'd have been excited, but he got up and we weren't. So we need to be able to handle those emotional swings just like other people need to be able to handle those emotional swings. They got a turnover, we turned it over, the ball's down there, keep the ball down there and give us the ball at midfield.
Right, and ways to, as you say, utilize the entire team and some opportunities to get some help and to live to play another day and use the entire roster to accomplish your goals. So the goals are still there, right? You still have 9 games remaining, still most of the conference schedule, almost the entire conference schedule ahead. I know you spent some time in the last couple of weeks in particular refocusing your team. The whole deal with meeting at the 50-yard line following the Clemson game was a way to kind of get people's attention and get them back in line. Do you feel like those guys, your team has their heads in the right place at this point?
They're 18 to 22-year-old males. I can't answer that question. If I could, I may not be sitting here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do think that we've put a light on things. They know what we want. There's no gray when we communicate. And if we really want to be the team that we need to be and we want to be, it's going to happen 1 week at a time. And we need to refocus here on Western Michigan and stop worrying about other things down the road that may or may not come to us if we don't handle our business on Saturday.
So you take on a Western Michigan team that last year in Kalamazoo, it couldn't have gone better in especially the first quarter. The first half, things are really rolling, and you've got it kind of going downhill in what turns out to be a 55-point game. Western Michigan had its moments as well and fights back into the game where you had to reverse course a little bit. What do you make, I guess, of that game? You don't have Eric Dungy anymore for what he did last year running for 200 yards against the coach that recruited him in Tim Lester. and they return virtually everybody that played in that game.
They do. They return almost the entire defense, and they definitely return the two explosive players that helped them in the comeback, the tailback and their wide receiver that's also playing defensive back right now, along with a quarterback that's thrown over 70% completion. So new defensive coordinator, not the same guy that we went against last year. They made a change on defense, and this football team is really, really good. So it's going to be exciting, and I would imagine they'd come in here ready to go.
You said something earlier in the week about the kicking game, and everybody knows now, starting from the beginning of last year, when Andre Schmidt made his debut at Western Michigan and started to set the tone, and we've seen Sterling Hoffrichter's progression. He's coming off an amazing game against Clemson, averaging better than 52 yards per punt. That, okay, you go into the kicking game at least even with the opposition. How can you make it a positive, not just the absence of a negative?
Well, I think, first of all, we haven't lost a kicking game. That's the first thing that you want to do. But with our kicking game, it's not average, and we don't want to settle. We should be able to dominate people in the kicking game and really use it as another offensive weapon to score points. And we need to have that attitude while we have the kickers and the returners that we have here before they graduate and go make money doing something else, and we have to start over again.
Sure. Military Appreciation Day this weekend, a noon start, the Orange and Western Michigan. We know that when this comes up each year, it's special to your team. Football and the military is so closely linked, of course, for decades and generations. What does it mean to you as the son of a military man and grew up in that kind of family and environment?
The first thing that it means to me is as much, and the two sports are linked, and my dad was in the Navy and he played semi-pro football for the Navy. And I used to be on the chain crews and watch him and my uncle play. My dad was the fullback and my uncle was the starting quarterback, and I used to watch him play growing up. But the first thing I want to say is this, is that no matter how close the link is between football and armed services, it's not comparable. I mean, when you're in the armed services, you're in the number one team, and everything else is second to that. And you can't compare the two. And nothing upsets me more than football coaches trying to compare games to WAR and stuff like that, because there is no comparison. But outside of that, I think football is the closest game that can bring you to being in that atmosphere of giving up everything for the guy next to you and being totally unselfish for a common goal. And I think that's the bridge between football and armed services.
Okay, amen to that. Now time for our Perry's fan question. You can send your questions in at cuse.com/inside scoop. And Coach Mike from Clay writes in and asks about the Dome atmosphere. What was your favorite part of coaching in front of a sellout Saturday?
I've got to go back to before we ran in when the score was 0-0, that standing in the tunnel and looking out while they're blowing the smoke and we haven't ran out yet, and actually coming out of the tunnel a little bit to get a 360, to actually look at the upper decks to see how filled they were so that I could put a picture in my mind, put a picture in my mind and leave it there. Very proud of the community, the student body, the administration, and very proud of Upper State New York, that we were the centerpiece of the United States. We really were. The place to be was Syracuse, and if you were in Syracuse, the place to be was the Dome. And all eyes were on us, and it didn't work out the way we wanted it to, but I thought it still put our best foot forward to show what this community, this administration, and this university can do, and how proud they should be of, being a Syracuse, being an Orange.
Sure, it was. I've said throughout the week, those of us that talk about that and build up to the game, we can't impact the game once it kicks off. That's your job. But it's still pretty cool to build up to that, and it could happen again and again. So look at it to see if you have another opportunity sometime soon, okay?
Sounds great.
All right, you can submit your question at cuse.com/inside scoop. Perry's also wants you to know they now have ice cream delivery, which is a good way to work your way through the weekend as well. More information on that at perrysicecream.com. Thanks for joining us for the Perry's Inside Scoop here at Cuse TV.